नमस्कार, मी सुनील माळी. विश्वकर्मा प्रकाशनच्या परग्रहावरून कोरोना आणि या पुस्तकाचा लेखक. परग्रहावरून कोरोना हे पुस्तक म्हणजे विज्ञान काल्पनिका आणि वास्तविका आहे. मराठीमध्ये विज्ञान काल्पनिका अनेक आहेत, वास्तविकाही आहेत, पण प्रथमच मराठीमध्ये विज्ञान काल्पनिका आणि वास्तविका याचा संगम झाल्याचं हे पुस्तक आहे. काय आहे हे पुस्तक? या पुस्तकामध्ये परग्रहावरच्या 2 ग्रहांवरच्या जीवसृष्टींवरचा वाद आणि त्या वादातून एक जीवसृष्टी दुसऱ्या जीवसृष्टीवर विषाणू अस्त्र सोडणार आहे. आणि हे विषाणू अस्त्र सोडताना त्याची चाचणी घेण्यासाठी त्यांनी पृथ्वी या ग्रहाची निवड केली. पृथ्वीवरच्या चीन देशातल्या वुहानमध्ये ते जीव उतरले आणि त्यांनी इथं कोरोना पेरला. आणि तो पेरल्यानंतर पुढचा जो भाग आहे हा भाग आपल्याला वास्तविकेमध्ये येतो. ही वास्तविका म्हणजे 16 देशांनी पहिल्या 8 महिन्यांमध्ये कोरोना विषाणूचा सामना कसा केला आणि त्याला तोंड कसं दिलं याचं वर्णन आहे. एकेका देशाला एक एक प्रकरण दिलेलं आहे आणि 16 देश किती यशस्वी झाले, त्यांना किती यश आलं, किती अपयशी ठरले याचं हे चित्रण आहे. आणि या चित्रणामधून संपूर्ण जगाने कोरोनाचा केलेला सामना आपल्याला वाचायला मिळणार आहे. मराठीतलं अशा प्रकारचं हे पहिलंच पुस्तक आहे. आपण ते जरूर वाचाल अशी मला खात्री आहे. धन्यवाद.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to day 3 of the 9th edition of PILF at Studio 3. We now begin a very interesting discussion, Reality in Bytes, with our guests. Our first guest, Rochelle Potkar, poet, critic, screenwriter. Rochelle is an author of 4 Degrees of Separation and Paper Asylum, shortlisted for the Rabindranath Tagore Literary Prize 2020. Her poetry film Skirt, showcased on Shonda Rhyme Shondaland, and co-author of The Coordinates of Us. Our next guest, Abhimanyu. Reluctant to stick to one genre, Abhimanyu has developed a writing style that he likes to call provocative literary fiction. Saath is a collection of 7 short stories that include genres like magical realism, transgressive fiction, dystopian, fantasy, and thriller. Abhimanyu's first book, Beyond 3 Words, is a psychological thriller. Our next guest, Rita Chhablani. Rita has written lead articles for national and international newspapers. A popular yoga teacher, she went on to author her first book, The Joys of Yoga. Her second, Despite Odds, Tales of Choices, received rave reviews in the US. She initiated a writers group in Pune. Having worked for UNICEF, she champions the cause of education and currently volunteers for 2 NGOs. Sudha Yadav will be leading this conversation. Her first book is Siddhartha Street, a collection examining the intertwined lives of Caucasian Street, to be published by Vishwakarma Publications. Her second collection is complete and now she's working on a third one. I now request Sudha Yadav to take this conversation forward. Thank you.
This is a very exciting panel for me, especially expressing the short form, which is one of my most favorites to write in. So if you look at the panel, we have a poet, we have a philanthropist, and we have a provocateur. Yeah. So I want us to immediately just get started, and please let us discuss what draws us as writers to the short form. Can I go to Abhimanyu, please?
Yes. I just have one word for it. It's very personal. Vengeance. Vengeance led me. Yeah. So 5 years ago, around 5 years ago, Times of India started this contest, right? It held a contest, a short story contest, judged by, imagine the biggest names in Indian literature. They were there. They were judging. So I won't name any, but you can figure it out, right? Fiction. I'm talking fiction. So they held this competition, and I at that time had suffered a crushing defeat by a beast called book promotion. My first novel, I failed to reach out to people. I don't know, friends and relatives tell you that
Yeah.
it's a good book, but you don't know what to do with it next, right? So, and it was a self-published title. So I read the article and I thought that, might as well write a short story and impress these big guns so that my novel gets acknowledged.
Okay.
So I wrote a few short stories. All of them bombed. Everything got rejected, and I was furious. And I just made a promise to myself that I'm gonna write my own short story collection. I nobody was ready to represent me. I didn't have a literary agent. Publishers weren't talking to me. So, but I was hell bent, and I thought, yeah, let's just get the next book that I will come out with will be a traditionally published short story collection. So,
Okay.
in short, vengeance led me to short stories.
Wow, that's quite quite a story by itself. Rochelle, how about you? What makes you write short stories, especially being a poet? Okay, I think we're having some issues with Rochelle's line. Rita, can I ask you the same question, please?
Yes, for me, I think my first book is Despite Odds, Tales of Choices.
Yeah,
And as you
yeah.
can see, Tales is there, you know what? Hundreds of stories, hundreds of people come into your life, and you feel each person has a story to tell. And there are any number of stories that rotate around in your head. And so I picked these stories, these women, and I feel a short story is all about the urgency. The
Okay.
urgency with which you write about that main character, you develop the setting, you get into the book funnel, literally, of that character, and you build it all up, and there's so much joy, there's an excitement, and you put your pen to paper. Of course, these days you put your fingers on the keyboard,
Yeah.
but when I wrote this book, I like writing longhand, but
Mm-hmm.
then there's a feverish urgency, and I'm so thrilled that I
Okay.
don't have to wait for 6 months to 1 year to
True.
finish that project as it
Yeah.
happens in the novel. So I love short stories.
Yeah, the
Yes.
sense of satisfaction perhaps in completing a short story collection is quicker as a writer, and as well you get a feel for the market very quickly, whether your publishers like it or not. And it's an excellent point that you mentioned about characters. Characters are maybe even a little bit more dominant in short stories, and in essence we try to encapsulate the story itself into a character sometimes. So I quite enjoy that, like playing with a few characters, but giving them certain amount of nuance, certain amount of history to and use them as vehicles even to get to my
Yes.
point and to express it. Yeah, Rochelle, you're back. Can you hear us?
Yes, I'm back. Yes, I
Okay.
can hear you. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, I can. Okay, Rachel,
Yeah.
we just went around and we asked like what draws us to the short story. Now you're a poet, yeah, that's a different form altogether, and clearly, you're talented enough to move forward through forms. So, can you tell me what draws you to the short story as a writer?
So thank you, Sudha, for this question. I think practicing in many forms, from the haiku to the free verse, the novella, and even writing a novel and written to screenplays, my
Mm-hmm.
trigger or my motivation is the production. So the short
Okay.
story you can write in one sitting and you can edit it in one sitting. So there's a sense of
Okay.
achievement that comes from
Yeah.
this writing compared to all other long forms where you have to edit over a period of time and you need so much of more discipline for that.
Yeah, very true. And that was the consensus across the panel as well, that we have a sense of satisfaction, sense of achievement when it comes to the short story form. Now, Rochelle, I'm still going to come back to you because, like you said, you've written
Sure.
different forms. Okay, I'm going to put you in the
Sure.
spot here. So, what do you think? The short story versus the long form, or the celebrated novel, right? Especially in English literature, let's be fair. You would rather be known as a novelist, or rather have your debut as a novelist as opposed to a short story. Well, in regional languages, in fact, the short story is perhaps has a higher level and bar in mind. But of course, I write in English, so I can't speak for them. So tell me, how would you say which is better? Which is better to write? Which is better to read? Do you enjoy one more than the other?
So the question is to me, right? I
Yes.
just missed. Yeah. So I think the novel demands and begs for too much of interiority, and a screenplay,
Mm-hmm.
has to juice out drama, the highs and lows of drama in per milliseconds. So
Okay.
when you talk of the short story, it has just that much amount of canvas to cover a certain life of the characters. It doesn't have
Mm-hmm.
to go too deep. So I think this
Mm.
is the canvas which completely allows you to play with 5,000 words. Like I was thinking in my collection, Bombay Hangovers, the first
Mm-hmm.
story, Arithmetic of Breasts, actually covered lot many years, but because of just
Mm.
the simple asterisks, okay, just the
Mm-hmm.
simple asterisks that create sections, I could time
Mm.
lapse so many years into just 5,000 words. And so
Yeah.
a short story allows you to
Mm.
tell so much out of the frame by
Mm-hmm.
telling a little inside the frame.
Fine. Fine. Okay. So that's something I really enjoy, and that challenges me as a writer. The passage of time,
Mm.
because in a short story,
Yeah.
like you said, to create eons and to have that aspect is more preferable in a novel, because to transport the reader across time, we have to show them that time is passing, right? So the short story is a challenge in that sense that we have to do it, and some of the greatest short story writers are able to do so. That's wonderful. What about you, Abhimanyu? In South, do you have a lot of time travel?
Yes.
Okay.
If I have to go easy on myself, I will choose a novel.
Okay.
Novel is, of course, a preferred
Okay.
way to express myself, but
Okay.
uh, I think short stories are devils. I'll tell you why. I'll tell you
Okay.
why. Because it's very easy to, not easy. It takes less time to go through it. Once you've written it, maybe it
Mm-hmm.
took you 1 day, maybe it took you 1 month. But once
Mm-hmm.
it's done, once you have the draft, right, it's very
Yeah.
easy to go from point A to point B to finish the whole
Mm-hmm.
short.
Okay.
That's where the problem lies. Every
Mm-hmm.
time you read it, you have a better story. Every time you read it, you have a better short story.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly what happens with me. So if I so here's the funny part. You also
Okay.
grow as a human being, right? You like either you become better or you become worse. For example, so that right now you are this, you are this beautiful lady who's an author, right?
Thank you.
Tomorrow, and you've written a short story and you read it
Mm-hmm.
and you get better. Tomorrow, suddenly you become this hardcore criminal, right? Your short
Mm.
story will become 10 times better.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, your perception, your perspective, everything changes, and your
Mm-hmm.
story keeps on getting better, keeps on getting better. Short stories are devils because it is the decision making is the hard point. That when do you decide that, okay, now is the time I'm going to give it away for publishing or to be
True.
edited.
True. Okay.
So, because the writer wants to put the best foot forward, right? And
Yeah, of
if
course.
you know that another reading and it will get better. So it was very difficult for me to decide when to put these 7 short stories out. Novel writing is very intimate. I enjoy writing it. You mingle with the characters really well. So in
Mm-hmm.
order to think what the writers would feel, you get that feeling, you extract that feeling from your imagination. Like you're reading it while writing it, and you're like, oh, this might feel like this might feel like this. So it's very slow, intimate. It's a slow drip of, that feel
Okay.
good factor. Short
Yeah. Okay.
stories are, short stories are fun to edit, novels are fun to write.
Okay, so yeah, my experience is quite varied on that. To be honest, my rewriting takes a lot more time, especially in short stories. I tend to ponder, possibly because I'm afraid to give it to the editor, which is what you're saying. Like I don't want them to see it at this stage. No, no, no. This has to be work. This
Right.
character is not doing the right thing. No, no, they have to move around. So yeah, I get it. But I think what you say about coloring, that is your experiences, color your work. Yeah,
Right.
that's very true, and the growth of our writing is very much dependent on our
Yes.
on our journey as well. Rita, you tell me, what do you think? Long story or short story, novel or the short story collection?
See, having written both, I've written
Mm-hmm.
a book of short stories and I've written a novel too. And I must say, the novel, when you start writing it, it gives you a great deal of trepidation. It's like,
Uh-huh.
you know, that am I going to be able to climb up to the peak of Mount Everest? It's almost
Mm-hmm.
like you see the peak, but I don't know whether I have it within me, that strength, muscle strength to climb it.
Mm-hmm.
But in its own way, each is a beautiful form.
Mm-hmm.
One gives you that sense of urgency, the condensed
Mm-hmm.
tone,
Mm-hmm.
and you're able to complete the story. It's like, you know, your tooth has a filling and you just fill it and
Okay.
it's done. So it's the short story.
Okay.
But novel,
Mm-hmm.
like for instance, I have this story, short story, Eyes Lead Me to You, The Beggar Girl. It's about
Okay.
a beggar girl. Now, I was thinking if I were to convert it into a novel, Beggar
Okay.
Girl ended at a particular point and you're just allowed so many words. But what if I were to convert it into a novel, which meant that you have to do a lot of character exposition? You
Mm.
have to bring in a complex atmosphere. Of course, time travel happens even in a short story. For instance, in The Beggar Girl, I transported the story 25 years forward. So you
Mm-hmm.
can do all that, play
Yeah.
around with generations. But in a novel, you have to have your sustained attention. When you're sitting there and you've got all your research, your facts, your complex atmosphere, everything about it already there in your mind. And it doesn't leave you,
Yeah.
even in the middle of the night. You
Mm-hmm.
sit up many times and you dash to the study because you've got an idea for that short story and you better write it down fast before it vanishes.
Okay.
Writers are supposed to be quirky creatures, okay?
Yeah.
And I'm sure all of you would agree with that because ideas vanish.
Yeah.
And novel, I think, appeals to me, though my next work is a short stories book again to be published by Vishwakarma. But I have a novel after that. So I'm
Okay.
waiting for that novel to take birth. Yeah.
Okay. Have you started on it or it's on the works?
Yes, yes, yes. It
Yeah.
is about 70-80%. You
Wow.
see, the lockdown gave us so much time that
Yeah.
literally we were locked down
Yeah.
and minds were open
Yeah.
and there was so much brewing in the mind if you didn't allow the negative chatter to happen. And
Mm-hmm.
so I've written, penned two books. So one
Wow.
is coming this month
Yeah.
and one soon after that. And as
She's
I
a
said, you
hardworking
know,
person, huh? Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
and it's wonderful. It's a beautiful work of creation. It's like almost giving birth to a baby. I
Yeah.
don't
It's
know. It's
yeah.
something
We all we all think of our works as babies, I think, and maybe we're a little bit more
That's
protective
the
of them.
closest I can get to it. Yes.
Yeah.
yes.
Okay, let me ask you, like, now, of course, we're talking about the long form and the short form in terms of writers, right? But we're in first and foremost, we're readers. Otherwise, we wouldn't even get into writing. So I'm a pretty indiscriminate reader in the sense that although I love writing short stories, I love to read all forms: fiction, non-fiction, long form, short form. But when it comes to the short story, right, the assumption is that my reader, who or she, whoever they may be, they have to finish that entire story in one single session, right? A single session, and I have to sustain that person's interest remarkably well for that particular moment. That's a challenge by itself. Wouldn't you agree, Rochelle?
See, you know what is happening because we have mutated as audience. Okay, so when we are
Mm-hmm.
readers, we are also web series consumers. So now
Sure.
now I'm reading Manu Bandari's short stories, and I'm
Hmm.
reading them like web series. So I pause when I feel abhi episode khatam ho gaya. Now I want to take a break. So I
Okay.
think we can't forget that the reader is also a viewer and consumer of many other art forms,
Yes.
and
Hmm.
as different art forms mutate and become better, the reader is a different reader. So I have changed as a reader. I read
Okay.
very fast on my iPad or my iPhones, and I'm reading all kinds of interesting stuff. I'm not sure, sometimes it's for research alone. It might just be to entertain myself or to know more. And sometimes it becomes a new story, because that's how, the aquifer of the mind works. Everything comes into it and it becomes an amalgam or an alchemy of something else. So seriously, there's no way how you can locate a reader today.
Okay, what you're saying is that the reader is a changing animal, a mutating animal, yeah, and we shouldn't take
Yeah,
things for
definitely.
granted. We shouldn't keep certain conditions in mind. That
we
can
need to
be.
we need to mutate we need to mutate as much, and
We have
also
to
I was
evolve,
thinking
shall we say?
while, yeah, evolve, and while writing also, what Rita was saying, I
Yeah.
believe in the inception and the incubation phases, because if I've noticed that if I
Okay.
write something too early, it's a raw kind of writing, and if I write
Yeah.
it too late, I keep it in my head for too long, it's very stale. So there's an
Yeah.
absolute time when it brims over from your mind to the page, from the page to the the first draft, and there is a brimming over, and later with the editing there's a trimming over.
True. Okay. Okay. Abhimanyu, what about you? What do you think in terms of the new reader or the new writer?
I am so glad that Rochelle brought this up. People often complain that you must have heard short attention span, right? People are talking
True.
about
True.
it a lot. Short attention span. Everyone has short attention span. Uh, and they've I used to curse it, that what will I do? I'm writing books, I'm writing like hundreds and hundreds of pages, and people attention span is getting shorter. What do I do? I don't think like that anymore. I think it's
Okay.
time to stop whining about it. It is not a curse. Short attention span is not a curse. If you haven't realized, it's evolution. You can't do anything about it. If you are a writer or an artist, and if you don't pay attention to this, if you don't evolve with this, your art will die a dinosaur's death. It's as simple as that.
True.
So you need to understand. It is my job to give my readers a Netflix experience just by reading my book. It is my job to
Okay.
do that.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm so glad Rochelle brought this up, because I think the same way. We can't sit and whine about it. Yeah, everything is. People get these 15-second dopamine doses every single minute on their phones. So it's gonna happen. It's already happened, and it might go beyond. So, and I'm not even talking about reducing the amount of words that you write.
Sure.
I'm worried that my next novel, I'm writing less. It has to be as thick as, I don't know, George R. R. Martin's books. It's the way you write every single line, right? So when you said attention, or how do you keep the reader hooked in, that's the craft. That's what you have to learn.
Yeah.
And your best guinea pig or your lab rat will be yourself. You have to
True.
spend time with
You're the
yourself.
first reader.
Yes, always. So that's what I feel. Let's stop complaining about short attention span. Let's write good, interesting, captivating stories.
No, 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 very true. I mean, I think it's obvious that as we're the first reader, and if it should capture our interest and hold our own interest there. But what I would like to ask Rita is, do you feel that's a little different for you, in the sense that when you read your work, are you already thinking of the reader initially itself, or not?
Well, I think that as Rochelle and Abhimanyu and you say that the reader these days, yeah, that's true. They have a short attention span. I know what happens with the remote and how quickly we change
Yeah.
stuff on it, because I
Yeah.
don't like this one, and it's available on a platter these days. So the choice is tremendous. And nobody, I mean, very few people really want to hold the actual book and all that. Fine with that. But I also go along with Rochelle and Abhimanyu and you that basically I think we have to evolve as authors. I can't live.
Yeah.
Theme is universal. Theme of
Okay.
love and betrayal and friendship, that continues. Leo Tolstoy, yes, he wrote then, but now we have newer authors. But the theme remains the same. So you then can create a situation or an incident or whatever, a story around what is happening in modern times, give them a brief glimpse of the past and bring it again back to how they want to see it or how they want to listen to a story or read a story. you have to bring a modern format to it. I think
Okay.
that's important for me. It's a lesson I have learned. Rochelle and Abhimanyu, of course, are much younger, but I have learned that lesson that I can't dwell in the past and say, wow, that was wonderful. And I'm not going to evolve with the times. I have to evolve, and I have. And I think I'm very happy where I am today,
Very good.
able
Okay,
to
well
grab
said.
the attention of the readers. I think for an author, that's so lovely. That's so important.
No, that is absolutely important. I mean, we cannot call ourselves writers if we are not able to hold and capture the attention of our reader. We have pretty much agreed that this is a case of evolution. We have to change along with the reader and the medium, and so on. Let's move on to a question that's perhaps that we've all touched upon in our work, which is place. And by place, I mean the physical setting of our work. So sometimes when you write a short story collection, we're dealing with so many different themes and personas and so on that it's very easy to use a place as an anchor, and therefore the short story sort of has a theme, so that the reader almost gets the feeling of reading a novel, if you like. Rochelle, I'll go to you. Your stories are set. The collection is set in Bombay. Can you take us through that?
Yes. So Sudha, this was not a planned project, but staying in Bombay for so long, I think the characters had seeped into me, not only the city, and it had
Okay.
seeped into me through all five senses, and even the
Mm-hmm.
sixth sense, that is memory.
Okay.
When I was looking at how to collate these stories, I suddenly realized the common thread running to them through them was the city, because the city was a character, Bombay,
Okay.
Mumbai, and
Mm-hmm.
each of my stories in this Bombay Hangovers collection is dominated by one sense. So in some place
Mm-hmm.
you would see that the character Rusi is thinking all about the quintessential perfume in a
Mm.
city that sometimes smells bad, right? I mean, Bombay
Yeah.
can smell very bad, or very salty, or
Yeah.
very fishy sometimes. And
Yeah.
you would find noise as another dominant sense or theme in Kay D'Souza's story, because she's trying to fill her loneliness and her denial with the noise. There's clockwork noise in the city. If you
Yeah.
just listen to it, from the dirty honking to I don't know what factory sirens. So this
Mm.
becomes part. The city is speaking to you. So the city became the character, and I feel
Mm.
that place, as much as we live in places swell and dwell in us, and sometimes we
True. True.
carry so many places inside us that we are
Mm-hmm.
sometimes countries and continents.
True.
So
True.
I think this place as a theme will never end, because it's not because you cannot uproot a character and keep them rootless in a sci-fi world, but because
Mm-hmm.
place is so enigmatic in its four widening corners, that you could get
Mm-hmm.
so many things, and place will characterize your characters, and it will transform and transmogrify the stories, because sometimes we live in one place, but we live so many places in that one place. So yeah, so Bombay has my collection has all. In fact, there was one reviewer who called it, that this collection takes you to the sights, sounds, smells, and sweat levels unique to Bombay. So this was in the newspapers. I think this reviewer summed it up for me when she
Yeah,
spoke of
that's
place. Yeah,
nicely put, and it's true.
yeah,
Bombay. I had the occasion of living there for about 2 to 3 years. It's an unbelievable experience. The city is alive by itself,
yeah.
and that's excellent as well. Abhimanyu, what about in South? Does plays figure in quite a bit?
I always let the story dictate.
Okay.
So far, it has been like that. I never choose a city and then build a story around it. Most of the
Mm-hmm.
time, it's the protagonist of the story that
Mm-hmm.
decides. And then, for me, place hasn't. So far, there's just one short story. It's called The Grey Ghost Killer in Saath. One short story in Saath. It's called that is set in Ladakh.
Mm-hmm.
So, and because it demanded, because Grey Ghost is, if you guys do not know,
Mm-hmm.
the snow leopard in the Himalayas,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
One of the most elusive animals ever. You can't find him, you can't look at it, you can't even spot it. So
Mm-hmm.
the story revolves around that. So that required Ladakh to be there. The lifestyle required to be presented out there. Otherwise, I don't let places consume that much area in my head and in my story.
Mm-hmm.
In my first book, the novel Beyond Three Words, everything was imaginary. No real space, no, because I wanted to create a new
Okay.
place, a new town. So, so I would like to write something related to a place. I'm from Jammu, right? So my next novel, most probably, it will cover Jammu, Pakistan, and Berlin. I haven't been to Pakistan. I haven't
Okay.
been to Berlin,
Well,
but
okay.
but but these are the cities, the places that I would like to cover in my next book. If you've read Down and Out in Paris and London by George Orwell, or if you
Yeah.
read Salman Rushdie's work, they're very they're stuck to the cities, and they create amazing stuff from the cities, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
you will see a lot of Bombay or Mumbai from Salman Rushdie. You will see that a lot,
Yeah. Yeah. You do.
and suburbs, everything.
Mhm.
Yes, places never dictate my stories writing, but I would like to write about a
Yeah,
specific
it
city.
seems almost like you have a conscious effort to unmoor yourself, right? Like you
Yes,
would rather not be, anchored to it. You'd rather let the story dictate, like you said. Yeah,
yes.
yeah. So Rita, what do you think? You're a very well traveled person. In fact, you just moved to Bangalore as well. So tell us, how does place influence your work?
Well, I think it's an advantage to travel because
True.
when my life began in Kutch,
Mm-hmm.
and so that has, they have a flavor
Mm.
everywhere, the places. It begins in Kutch, then I went to Bombay, and then I came to Delhi. Then I've spent 20 years in Chicago
Okay.
and traveled the US, then
Mm.
came back to Pune, Mumbai, and now Bangalore.
Mm-hmm.
So in this river,
Mm-hmm.
you meet so many different people, and these are the protagonists of my short stories.
Mm.
And as you know, the character, the setting, the place becomes a character, as
Okay.
Rochelle says. That when you think of the character, you think of the situating that character in a particular place, and it
Okay.
just comes alive. The two of them sort
Mm.
of, it's a beautiful marriage because the you already know the place, you have
Yeah.
lived there, so it comes alive because you come alive when you think of all the physical and the geographical and the historical elements of the city. It
Mm.
all comes alive in your story. You don't even realize how it
Yeah.
happens. And later,
Yeah.
like Andaman Islands, I didn't think that my protagonist would find herself in Andaman Islands.
Mm.
It just happens. I think it's
Yeah.
wonderful to travel and
Yeah.
come back with all these stories and to make them come alive in those places.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think certain places create stories. Like
Yeah.
Paris, one of my stories is situated in Paris.
Mm-hmm.
And Paris is a city of great enchantment,
It is.
heartbreaks,
Mm-hmm.
and you find the charm around you.
Hmm.
So I think it adds a dimension to your short story. Yeah.
Okay. So my experience is that for my first collection, for some reason I decided that I wanted to have the stories compressed or situated on one street alone, a street that's a dead end street. So in essence, most of the short stories would be about where the character takes center stage, and of course we go through the characters' lives and such. What happened to me, whether consciously or unconsciously, was that in the end I realized that the street doesn't have a voice. The street needed a voice, and the only way to end that novel or end that collection was to give that street a voice, and to do that in the most subtle way as possible, because this was the street was a witness, if you like. The place becomes a witness to the lives of these people, and that was something that I had to do with a certain amount of subtlety without it being too garish, and yet give that street a certain persona. So Siddhartha Street is about a dead end street in Chennai, where I'm situated in right now. And it goes about looking at very what you would call normal or ordinary lives. But as writers, we know that there is no such thing as ordinary lives, and there are no such thing as simple people, right? So everybody goes through their own journeys, and it was my objective in bringing out something that doesn't shock you or provoke you immediately, but something you read and you may even forget about it reading. But the next day, when you go about your day, you tend to meet up with these characters. Suddenly, you'll feel, oh wait, she says something like this. This character resembles that character in the book, and so on. So, place for me suddenly came up during the collection. So yeah, that was very interesting to share it with all of you. Okay, let's talk about
That's very
mediums.
intriguing. That,
Yes, right.
just a sec, Sudha. That's very interesting. I wanted to know, how did you
Yeah.
voice that street? Was it in dialogue or just description?
No, it had to be. I couldn't give it a voice, so I had to do description. In the sense, doesn't really cut it, because description is describing the street or about the street. It's not the voice itself.
Mhm.
So I had to structure the story that the ending almost gave a message from the street, because I had assumed that the street is a
Okay.
witness. Yeah. So I assume the
Nice.
street is a witness, and then the street merely notices things. So what a silent witness, if you like. Yeah. So imagine that you are going through your life, and you're going about your day, and you assume that you're the one leading your life, but we never assume there's somebody watching, right? We never
Yes.
assume that. Of course, in the most innocuous way, somebody's watching, somebody's seeing, not your neighbors, not your something. And how does that make you feel? How does that happen? I mean, if you when we go back and visit our homes, or our childhood homes, or childhood places, there is a feeling in those buildings, and there's this thing like they tend to take on a life of their own. And you wonder if it's just nostalgia, or if there is your own feelings and emotions that's making something come alive. So that's something that I wanted to, because the end story also is the finale piece, where the street sort of comes alive, and it's set back in time. So I had to go back and answer a few questions, or bring in new characters, or explain why people were motivated to do things the way they did. Yeah. So that's a bit about my collection. Let's talk about genres, because we have quite a few genres being handled here with ourselves. Rochelle, can you tell me how does it feel to move across mediums?
So I feel that the essence behind any genre, whether it's writing a haiku or whether it's writing, now when you write a haiku, you're searching for the ah moment.
Mm,
Okay, but you're encapsulating life in all genres, and
mm,
you are either telling what life is or what life ought to be. So when you're writing a haiku, it's like a narrative of one epiphany. One epiphany is enough. But in a short
yes.
story, you're writing so much more, right? Multi characters,
Mm,
and it can be more. And then as we move on to novels and screenplays and web series, it goes on expanding its capillaries. But I
mm,
feel somewhere it's all these forms for me, because I went between genres. I realized one common thing is like instruments of tension. I feel sometimes you compress it, and
okay.
there is only this much that comes out as a
Mm,
resonance for the reader and for the writer herself, because you first have catharsis when you write it
mm,
because you're compelled to take it out. So it's the compression that happens for yourself first,
mm,
and then you take the reader on a journey.
mm,
And For the longer works, it depends on how much more. Like I think in a scene in a screenplay, you really compress it for drama. If it doesn't have dramatic value, it's just going to be
yeah,
a
not good.
placeholder. But
Mm,
you are not that, you don't find it that much of demand in, say, a beautiful descriptive paragraph or page of a novel. You can
yeah.
still have a gala, describing it. So I feel the instruments of tension differ, and it's a whole physics of it, like how much
Yeah,
you
I think
compress. I
yeah, I
look
think
at it that way.
you're almost like you're able to construct this. You're very much what medium requires what at certain points of time.
Yeah, I think
Abhimanyu,
what has happened,
sorry.
however, is that all these different forms, what they
Mm-hmm.
finally do is create an aquifer in your mind, because
Mm-hmm.
because it's like the groundwater running beneath the land. It doesn't follow borders. So all art forms are like borders, okay, but your mind doesn't follow borders. It's like the groundwater. So
Yeah,
all these art
don't be
forms, whatever
restricted.
you
Yeah.
learn from any one of it, it
Mm-hmm.
finally alchemizes to become something different, and that's what I'm starting to enjoy now.
Oh,
Not
that's
what's above
excellent.
the ground,
Excellent.
what's below.
Yeah, yeah, the process. Yeah,
Yeah.
Abhimanyu, you've highlighted something called provocative literature. Can you explain that to me? And you do podcasts as well. So how does that feel from the written word to the spoken word, if you will?
Right. I'll take the podcast question
Sure, sure.
later. First, I'll talk about PLF and genre.
Mm.
So I've never. So it's always been idea first, then genre for me.
Okay.
So I stick. I'm very loyal to the idea that I have in my head.
Mm-hmm.
When I finish the story, or when I'm midway, whether it's a short story or a novel, then I Google it, that where do I fit in? Like, what is this
Okay.
genre? What am I writing? Otherwise, if I tell myself that okay, I'm going to write fantasy. I'm going to write. Then I'll be forced writing. I never do that. I avoid doing that. I did that. That's a mistake. I don't do that. I don't want to repeat that. So I don't want to tell myself I'm going to write fantasy or magical realism, etc., etc. I write the idea immediately, and then I see. Okay, then I go on my laptop and see that what people are talking about. What genre is this? That dictates my genre style, and one of the short stories in Saath. It's since you mentioned time travel, right? So
Yeah.
this story is about this porn addict, 26-year-old chain smoker, jobless porn addict who gets the power. One day suddenly gets a power to travel time, to go back in time, and first he tends to his carnal desires, and then eventually he just decides that he will witness the most horrific tragedies in the history, right? So
Okay.
he witnesses all of those,
Mm.
and all of this is being done because he wants to prove his father a point. So
Okay.
you can say that it was magical realism, it was adventure, all these things. It covers all those things. But if he's doing all of that to prove his father a point, you've read a twisted coming of age. It's a Bill Dunn's
Yeah.
romance.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so it's very hard to, for me, it's very hard to let genre dictate what I'm
Yeah.
going to write. So
Yeah.
I leave it, on faith that whatever happens, happens. We'll see what genre it is.
Okay, so that's amazing.
Coming,
So we have writers who are not really concerned about genre at the onset itself, right? We're letting the work maybe speak for itself, choose its own vehicle, if you like. So Rita, what would you say?
For me too, I think I write a story. I have an idea and I write a story first. I write it all down.
Okay.
And then when it's done, when it's finished, but then whatever genre it falls in, I don't know what is going to happen next and whether it'll turn up like a romantic a thriller or it'll just be some adventure. I have crime mystery. Yes, you have to think about it and
Yeah,
plan it out.
plotting. Yeah.
But any other genre, I think you just have to let the story carry you and be true to your written word, basically. Not try to fit it in because now I need to write this, so I need to fit it in. Then you lose your creativity. There's
Okay.
because
Kill
there is
inhibition.
certain flow to your words, flow to your thought, and write it down. And whatever genre then it fits into, it's fine. It's okay.
Okay, that's really something I like to hear because I truly don't believe genre, especially short stories. The genre is almost removed. You can write at will if you like. Short story itself by itself is a genre. Okay, let's have some recitation. Let's read some of our work. Shall we start with the poet first? Rochelle, can you take us into some verse?
All right, all right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this one is called Our Lovers, and it is it's the smallest story from the collection Bombay Hangovers. I'll read a very
Okay.
small passage. Back then in the 80s, I had just one lover. My beauty could afford only that much. Malaika's beauty afforded her many lovers. We lived as paying guests then, when jobs were scarce and pay low. Unlike now at these call centers, where you get everything. Malaika was a charmer. At that time, a dinner was a grand outing, and her boyfriends always took her out. She would come home and lay her gifts on the bed, and we would talk about this and that, examining the gifts, toying with them in blissful trance. Sometimes she would get perfumes that smelled like heaven. Other times, books with lovey dovey words on all their pages, or greeting cards with pumped up hearts, silver jewelry, or ornate candle stands. One guy even had the cheek to give her a polka dotted pandy. We had laughed the whole night making silly jokes around it. The sex wasn't great, she said, compared to the precautions she needed to take and the anxiety she faced before each period. I went around with the one and only Glenn. He was a pious churchgoer and had a strong sense of marriage and family. He watched Sunday TV and preferred the parks, museums, and seasides to the discotheques and movie halls. We would watch the waves jump to our feet every Saturday as we sat at the beachside. His gifts were nothing like polka dotted panties. rather a favorite book that he wanted me to read, or a free pass to a science convention. We made love, though Glenn told me that if I got pregnant, he wouldn't support an abortion. We would have to get married. Yeah, this is an excerpt.
Thank you. Abhimanyu, can we read something of yours? Or rather, can
Yes.
you read something?
Uh, it's the same short story, The Time Travel. It's one of my favorites.
Okay.
I'm going to use it. It's called 2 Minute Super Loser.
Okay.
And the protagonist, his name is Fateh.
Okay.
समय गोल है. I land up in a deep lunge, with one palm on the metallic floor, just like a superhero. The insides of Enola Gay rattle stridently. Remember Enola Gay? A Boeing B-29 bomber flying 32,000 feet above the city called Hiroshima on August 6, 1945. Now you get it, don't you? Standing behind the cockpit, I see Colonel Paul Tibbets, the man who did it, the man who dropped the little boy. 5 seconds gone. There is no time to waste, so I use my superpower, begging. Stop! Don't do it, Colonel. Please, I beg you, don't. My voice reaches Colonel and his co pilot Lewis's ears. No pilot would like to see a hooded figure wearing shorts, gold chain, and chappals inside his flying death machine. But all I get is raised eyebrows. That's it. My superhero ego is hurt. Focus, Fateh. Colonel says something on his headset and turns back to flying. Before I could scream, a strong pair of hands pin me down, rubbing my face on the metal floor like grating mozzarella. My mask comes off, and so does my hood. A cold metal touches my temple. Then I hear more footsteps, 3, 4, perhaps 5 of them. My head is sandwiched between metal and muscle. But do I stop begging? Not a chance. I am not a quitter. You will kill 80,000 people today, Colonel. Most of them aren't even soldiers. Don't drop the bomb. For God's sake, don't. The more metal boot dust I taste, the louder my voice gets. Pivots, now furious, gives me a deep stare and then turns away. No, Colonel, please don't. Something mechanical starts happening beneath my belly. For the next quarter of a minute, I only hear the brainwashed grumble of Enola Gray. Crew members release my head and crowd at one of the windows. I subconsciously join them. In this moment, Enola Gay has no soldiers, no enemies, only spectators, about to witness an unprecedented carnage. The explosion takes place far away, but the shockwaves shake the whole damn plane. A blinding white light cracks the heavens open, and a massive mushroom shaped cloud rises from the earth. No one can see what's happening on ground, but I can imagine ashes. I can feel souls going straight to heaven, a lot of them in one go. There is no sadness down there because no one's left. Everyone is ashes. There is this inexplicable silence inside the plane. Of course, there's a lot of noise, but there's silence, if you know what I mean. The colonel doesn't look back. The crew members look at me, but they do not attack. They just look. They know what they just partook in. They know what they did to the people down there. I blink and I'm back in my room. A hot teardrop trickles down my bruised cheek.
That's very nice. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Rita, can we hear some of your work?
Yes, this is from my book, Despite Odds, Tales and Choices. And it's a story that happens to be my favorite.
Okay.
So it's Eyes Lead Me to You, and the protagonist is Rajiv. So Rajiv continued. A little girl with chameli gajras would come running to our car every day. I am Chameli, she said to me one day. Suddenly, as she had appeared, she disappeared in the same manner, never to be seen again. He stopped for a moment and slowly added, till today. Heartrending sobs filled the room this time. Few minutes later, there was quiet in the room. Now it was the woman who sat in the room and she spoke. I'm indeed Chameli. It is you after all these years? That fair little boy with hazel eyes and light brown hair? The one who spoke the first kind words I'd ever heard. Will you be my friend, you said to a beggar girl? Later, after all the tears and laughter were done, and the empty plates of biryani and saag had been cleared, Rajiv asked Chameli a question, one she had been dreading. Where did you vanish after that day? 25 years. Chameli shivered, his question lifting the curtains on a painful past. She knew he would hate her after he had heard her story, but decided to be honest. She would hide nothing. laying bare the naked truth, the complete saga of hurt and betrayal. Sahib, my family had indeed stolen and begged for a living. Right from the very beginning, I had never felt like them. But what were the choices I had, though? On that fateful day when you saw me and my family being thrown into the police van, we were taken to the police station, beaten up, given a strict warning, and told to leave the city and go back to our village. However, we came to Mumbai, to newer pastures, and my family had continued begging and stealing. Later, my parents joined big organized gangs, and when I was older, I was sold to the highest bidder. Caught in the web of circumstances, I became known as Raat Ki Rani, Queen of Nights.
Thank you.
Nice.
Yeah. So for my work, I'm very excited. This is the cover. Yeah, I got it printed out yesterday. Let me try to put it. Yeah. So as you can see, the cover is inspired by R.K. Lakshman's work. I was influenced by his brother's writing, and his illustrations is something I quite enjoy. So I said I'd asked my publisher as well as my agent, and they were kind enough to. My agent is Book Bakers, and they were kind enough to say, "Okay, fine, we'll have a look at it," and then they went ahead. So I'm very excited about it because finally, the book is real. Finally, when you're finally touching it in your hand, it's amazing. And I'll read a very short passage, very small passage. It's at the end of a story. It's about a lady, an ironing lady. She's a single mother, and she's very much concerned that her daughter will end up leading the same life that she has, and it's been a long and hard life for her. So, but it ends on a note of hope, which is what I like. So, if you could just bear with me. Sasi could hear Thiru and Vijaya's voices on the street. I will get the papers together and come to you with the admission form. Sasi turned to Leah, her eyes welling up, and said, "But it's possible. They will accept her?" Pravasa the Sivan said, "Yes, it's the law. It's her right." Tears brimmed at Sasi's eyes. They streamed, finding paths on her worn face. She did not stem their flow or wipe them away. Her daughter's gurgling laughter echoed on the quiet street. Vijaya ran to her mother, her eyes bright as hope, her mouth sticky with sweetness, and her toes sprung on the flame-petaled dust of the street. Yeah, that's it. Thank you. So we have a couple of minutes, just 2 minutes or so. Would you like to talk about craft, or any question that you would like to bring up?
I was thinking about that question you had talked to me about.
Yes.
About how do my beliefs influence my writing.
Yes, you're the philanthropist. Please tell me.
Yes, for me, I think since forever, I think for me, education of less privileged has always been very, very, very dear to my heart. And so I worked for UNICEF, and that sort of also gave me that exposure to went to different places in the city, and it gave me, I could witness what they went through, and still there was that hope that I want to be educated. I don't want to be like my mother, sweeping and swabbing in someone's home, and I want to be different. And so I feel those thoughts shaped my beliefs. And when I got into a situation where I could put my pen to paper, literally, this was about 25 years ago, I think I wanted to write stories. My stories came tumbling forth about people, about women who try to survive in the toughest of situations. And of course, they don't make a choice to change anything. They just, because that's where they don't have the financial independence.
Changes just,
Till a ray of hope presents itself, and it could be anything, a situation or a person comes into their life and they make a choice that now they are ready and they want to change it. So for me, I think the lesson that I give to my students when I teach them these two NGOs, and I'm doing this online, is that we all have the weapon of choice in our hands, and we should never consider ourselves helpless. So I think all my stories basically, except for the drama thriller cross connection. I don't know
Okay.
how I penned that, but mainly my stories. I think I like to feel that it can bring about some change in someone's life. I'm fulfilled as an author. So it really, my beliefs do influence my words, and words have a power to change
That did.
society
Yeah.
because the stories have some aspect. All my stories have some aspect. They mirror society in a way, and
Yeah.
how all these social evils that are there, we can still have that power to change. We can change it.
I'll just because I think Abhimanyu wanted to tell us about his provocative literature, and we haven't given him an option yet. So, can you very quickly, if you could tell us what do you mean by that?
I think indirectly I already spoke about it.
Okay.
If you remember, I said that I want to give my readers a Netflix experience.
Okay.
That's my idea of doing it. I do provocation doesn't always necessarily mean that it has to be sexual arousal, though it is one of the
No.
biggest. Yeah, it can be violence, it can be humor, and sometimes it's just a mundane conversation between two characters that hits hard or deep. It needs to provoke something. It's a misconception that provocation is always sexual in flavors. That is not
No,
true.
yeah. Provocation for me is like something that just
Stirs you up,
makes you,
right?
yeah,
It
wakes you up.
shocks
Yeah,
you. Yeah,
yeah, it
and
wakes you up.
unsettles you in a very deep way. So
Yeah.
I like to do that because I like when it happens to me. So
Mhm.
I formed my writing style around this, and hence
Okay.
I call it provocative
Uh, yeah,
literary fiction.
Rochelle, sorry, just because for those would-be readers and writers out there, you do a lot of applications and you're on panels and such. Can you help those writers understand that process and why it's important to writing?
Yeah, but I think that is a very long discussion, and
Okay,
that I
okay,
would have to. I mean,
okay,
you would
fine.
have to look at a lot of guidelines on the website and all. I would like to
Sure,
just
fine, fine.
flash this cover
Ah,
of
sure.
Bombay Hangovers only
Yeah,
because this was a big decision to take about making it pedestrian. I was worried that what does Bombay mean to me, and Bombay meant a lot of
street.
rickshaws because my
Yeah,
characters in the book are all middle class. So for me,
okay.
Bombay was not all those big, beautiful monuments, but it was a simple, humble rickshaw. So I thought that in itself was a decision, to take of
Okay.
how
Okay,
pedestrian can
thank
you
you.
be. So I was like, okay,
Yeah, I'm sorry we are being signaled that we're running out of time. It was really wonderful to have this discussion with you. I'm
Sudha,
sorry. Yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
just
Sure.
to
Yeah.
interject you, this is the cover of my book, Despite Odds. As you
Okay.
can see, it signifies this woman who's free, her hair in the wind. And
Yeah.
I think this is what the book meant to me.
Okay.
That, you can let your hair loose and be who you are. That's what it meant to me.
Thank you, and good luck to us all in achieving that.
yeah.
Thank you very much once again, and we'll have to
Thank you
wind
so
up.
much, Agnes.
Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Sudha.
Bye
Thank you
bye.
for such a
Sudha,
wonderful
thank
session.
you,
Okay.
Yeah.
Rochelle,
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Abhimanyu,
you,
this is great.
and
Thank
thank you
you.
to the organizers as well.
Thank you.
Thank you to
Thank
the
you
audience.
so much for this beautiful discussion. It was really very intriguing. We thank Rochelle Potkar, Abhimanyu, Rita Chhablani, and Sudha Yadav for being our guests at PILF 2021. Coming up next, we have Why Buy My Book by debut authors. Join us for the same back in 15 minutes. Thank you.